Well, hello and welcome back to the Andrew Eborn show with me, Andrew Eborn, and delighted to be joined by Howard Cox, where we're going to resolve this in this sort of wonderful Jerry Springer, Jeremy Kyle, Cilla Black sort of way. The relationship between Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe. You know both men very well. Where are we, Howard? And fill me in on the background and the history of the two men.
Well, yes, I know them both well, but I don't know the underlying, communications detail that they've had between each other. What I do know from the top line point of view is Ben has actually, he's publicly said it on various shows, open invitation. He congratulated Restore Britain, setting up the party. He went on, and in that particular interview, Ben came on and said, well, let's get together basically and see how we can do it. And I've spoken to Rupert outside the courts, outside the thing. You've been there, and Rupert always says, "Oh, watch out! Here comes Howard. Here comes trouble." I mean, and it's an affectionate way of describing what I've done. And I repeat, he was very loyal to me on the day of my election, but the day of the election of the London mayor, where I had to go to a polling booth to put my signature in. Normally, you'd expect I'd have a few photographs taken for me, but not one person from Reform headquarters turned up, except Rupert. And I'll always remember that, his loyalty, his support and caring. And he's been very kind to me. And he texts me virtually every other day on various things he's doing, what he's doing, and most of the things I agree with, and not a problem. As far as Ben's concerned, I chose to go with Ben because of the way he set up the party. And to hear Edward Oakenfold say that it's run by the people at the top. Of course, we're going to have leaders there and people running things. This is a volunteer group. No one makes any money out of this. They're trying to actually run the show, and we've got a national director, we've got communications managers and things like that sort of thing. PR things. People working their butts off. 15 hours a day trying to do things, and maybe they're going to put people's noses out of joints in certain places. And I know for a fact that people have approached me and said, I want to be on the college, and I've recommended them, and they've been turned down. And, it's, I think because they didn't fit, when they're vetted, they didn't fit the right sort of, fit or whatever it is to exactly what we want to achieve. And Ben must be congratulated for getting, because remember, this college can get rid of Ben. We can actually, if he doesn't deliver what we want him to do, we
So,
can
so,
do
so,
that.
so, so let's talk about this. Well, two things that you talk about: the vetting side, first of all, because and people get a bit confused about what a member is, and this is what Ben has always sort of said beforehand. He said, "Look, this is the difference between reform and restore and advance." He says, "Well, first of all, restore Britain started off as a movement," and Ben would always make that joke about what a movement was something he had after breakfast and so on and so forth in that sort of Monty Python sort of way. But he was sort of saying that they were members of that movement, which is different to being a member of a political party. And now that it's a political party, Ben has made it clear that to be a member of Advance, you cannot be a member of another political party. So he himself, I presume, has now resigned his membership from Restore, because that's what he was beforehand. Are you a member of both?
No, I'm not a member of the party, but I was a member of the Restore movement. Yes.
Right. So, but when Rupert is talking about the 100 odd thousand, very impressive figure, what's he talking about there? Because before it's only just been recognised as a political party. What is the process which converts the members of the movement to members of the party?
Well, I assume they just literally people that have actually signed up to become part of the movement are now members. I think by logic, I suppose that's the way it's happened. I don't know. I'm not privy to Restore Britain's internal administration and the way it's working. It shocked me that they can get to 120,000 so quickly as members. Each obviously, I think is it £20, £25. That's a lot of money coming into that. We were £20. I think we've gone up a bit now, but 40,000. So
Yeah, you were a tenner to start with.
yeah, that's right. I can't remember myself. I mean, it seems like 100 years ago when all this all started. But
Yeah.
the serious point here, Andrew, is that we need to get rid of the Labour government, and we do need to come together and soon. And there are two major minds here. Ben Habib has got a mind and a brain the size of a planet to me. He's very, very ruffled by anything. When you throw something at him, he's very self-effacing. He's everything a politician today is not. He is an honest, principled person. Rupert, he's got the most incredibly, I suppose, forceful approach in politics. I love the way he stands up in Parliament and puts out questions, and you can see behind him he's got some, independents. Most of them are Islamic. Sitting behind him in that bench. Then you've got in front of him, he's got the people who used to be part of the Reform Party. He's incredibly brave politician. What he's doing, his salary doesn't go to him; it goes to various, causes or charities in the Great Yarmouth area. He's doing that, and there's no doubt about it. He's my type of MP. I'd love him to be my MP. As it happens, I've got a good MP in Katie Lamb. My MP, I really like her as well. But the two of them, let's go back to that point. Will they ever come together? That's the big issue here. And you and I, from my heart, wants them to come together. My head sees them not really anything like that happening in the short term. And both have come together to talk about it. I don't know really what Rupert has said to Ben. Ben's told me that he's turned him down. He doesn't want anything to do with Advance. He doesn't want the college. And there's certain people in the leadership or the administration that Rupert doesn't want anything to do with. So there is some personnel problems to get over. And the big issue for me is the whole ethnic issue, the racist issue that I still needs to be. So I'm not comfortable with Restore Britain's position on that at the moment. But I am.
So a lot of people, just to deal with that, a lot of people are sort of turning around and say, "Well, hang about, that's being misrepresented." What is their position as you understand it?
Well, mine is based around the fact is as soon as Restore Britain became a party, Ben's was insulted beyond belief. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments under one particular thing, which I'm amazed that Ben is still standing actually with some of the things. Even a big man like Ben, is entitled to be, upset. He's been insulted, his own ethnicity. He's more British than most people I know. He's paid his taxes here. He's run a big business here. He's been successful over here. He's stood, in politics, in European Parliament. He stood for 2 general elections. All these things. This man, he really cares and loves this country. And some of those comments I saw actually made me feel physically sick.
Well, it was disgusting. Some of the comments they used the P word.
Andrew, it coincided with when Restore became a party. So
Right.
I don't know who's orchestrating it. I haven't got a clue. Rupert probably have a go at me about this, but I just feel there are certain people around him distantly. I don't think close to him. He's got some good people there, who I know very well. They like me. They follow me on social media. They've met me many times. I've had a few bevies with them. They're good people. But there are certain people out there that basically, regard your skin colour to be a barrier for being British.
Yeah, I
And
mean, you mentioned a few times that Rupert might have a go at you. How often does he have a go at you, and how does that manifest itself?
he doesn't have a go at me. He just simply says, Howard, I've tried my best with Ben. I've got loads of WhatsApp messages and texts, and I won't reveal the detail of them because it's only fair I shouldn't. But he does say to me, I've tried, Howard. I mean, I don't know what Ben wants from me, and that sort of comment I get. And then I get from Ben the same sort of thing, both speaking to him and that sort of thing. I've tried like mad with Rupert. And Ben, I think, wants me to. In fact, Howard, I know you want an elegant way to solve this, and I love the way that Ben said that to me. But I just don't. I don't think it's solvable in the short term. But in the long term, whatever that long term is, Andrew, I think 18 months is probably long term. I still believe there's a chance that we will come together.
And it is trying to sort of unpack that because everybody's trying to encourage that, but it's trying to understand because all of you actually all came from reform. You all had pretty awful experiences there. Talk to me first of all about your experience, and then let's have a look at Rupert and Ben and theirs.
Well, mine was, as I said to you, it's very, very simple. It took me uh, twice. I said no to becoming a London mayoral candidate. And the original I was approached by Richard Tice, in fact, because he used to have a regular Sunday show on Talk. And I used to go on once a month talking about motoring political issues. We got to know each other, we became friends. I got to know Isabel Oakeshott, his fiance, and things like that. All those sorts of things came on, and we became, not, as I said, not bosom buddies. We're just friends, political friends, and his politics suited me. And they knew I was a Thatcherite type person, and they also knew I represented the motorists. And because of the ULEZ expansion was really the very much the central point of the London mayoral election. Everyone was talking about it, and I said to Richard, I would get rid of all ULEZ. The simple, not just the expansion, all of it completely. And they like that. Uh, Richard Tice's position. He said, "How would you like to come and stand for London Mayor?" And I took a good 2 to 3 months to say yes. And it was only because my supporters, because I floated it with some very close supporters of me, and they said, "Do it, Howard. If you should do it, it would help with Fairfield UK." As it happens, it probably didn't. Because a lot of people thought Fairfield UK was apolitical. I shouldn't be associated with any party, a bit like your show, that sort of thing. And for 15 years, I'd remained that way, near as damn it. Unfortunately, we got to the situation whereby, they wanted to be, I came fifth, I got 80,000, lost the deposit, etc. And I always remember standing on the stage behind Sadiq Khan delivering his victory speech, and yeah, again, I just, the man, I'm 6'4" and he's about 4'2", isn't he? And I just wanted to just get hold of the man and strangle him because I knew what he was doing to our capital, based on, again, an ideology rather than a genuine love of the city. And, we are a laughing stock worldwide. I travel and I speak to loads of people worldwide about us. And there's a lot of people want to set up Fairfield, Germany, and Fairfield, France, and Fairfield, Ireland, and all those sorts of things because they see what I've done. And I'm advising some of them on how to do that. And it all comes down to building groundswell of support, from drivers.
So, do you see that as a global? Do you see that as a global thing? Then is that something you'd like to achieve?
Well, I'd love to do that, but again, Andrew, I have to say to you, I'm a little tired. It's physically. This takes up 12 to 15 hours of my day,
Right.
7 days a week. It was my wife's birthday yesterday. It's the first time I
I
took some
know.
time off.
Yes.
Like that, and
You sent me
but
pictures
even
of you drinking a bottle of wine and everything. I loved it.
it was prosecco.
Oh, you're such a tart. Why, champagne? Come on, it's what a wonderful
Yeah,
birthday.
yeah, but even yesterday, I must have had 30 phone calls,
Yeah.
about 100 WhatsApp messages
Well,
coming
but
through.
it overtakes your life,
Yeah,
and to be fair, and it's not a party political thing. To be fair, a lot of politicians should do it because of points of principle. You're not going to be the richest person in the world. It does overtake your life. They always say it's politics is show business for ugly people. That's what they did say. I think it was Roger Stone who said that on my show. But the reality is this: you have to have an incredibly thick skin, don't you?
well, yes, I mean it's got thicker. I mean, some of the in the early days of campaigning in 2011, 12, 13, some of the comments I got from people were actually they did hurt me. I don't mind to tell you, I did shed a tear. The same people doing the same thing now, I just laugh them off. It is. I have my skin has got thicker, but I'm surprised I'm still in politics. Really, I should be just campaigning for the motorist. I'm toying with that decision still in the lead up to this budget. Probably I might make a decision and drop out of politics. I don't know. But unfortunately, for some stupid reason, a lot of people love me and want me to stay in politics because I seem to be actually cutting across some of the communication barriers. And the whole thing about Rupert and Ben, the way they were treated. Ben, was deputy leader. At a major conference in London, one of the early days, I spoke. I opened the conference and I announced. I said, "I'm your candidate for London Mayor." Got a standing ovation, and there was about 1,500 people in there. It was a lovely feeling, that sort of thing, and lots of people were talking there. I think Anne Middleton spoke at that one, and obviously at that point, Ben was deputy leader, and he spoke. David Ball spoke. All of the usual suspects were there, And I never thought there was going to be a conflict. And then it happened. Nigel came back on board after the, because you must appreciate Nigel Farage wasn't leader when I was standing for London Mayor. He was on the fringes. He called me a couple of times and told me what to do. It's quite interesting what, some of the things he said to me.
What did he say to you?
Well, he said you should be putting yourself first as the assembly member, because that's the way proportional representation works. And Alex Wilson was promised position one, and some of the people in there said, "Howard, do you mind him remaining position one?" I said, "No, I got no problem with that." Again, maybe I should be more ruthless. No, I should be number one. I'm the London mayor candidate. I should be the first one. If I don't get the mayoral position, I should get that assembly position. But I don't think that way. Alex Wilson been campaigning a long time, a very loyal reform person, and he was doing some good stuff. I became friends with him. But we only got one assembly member. We predicted 2 to 3 coming on board, but we didn't get that. So therefore, I was quite happy to be third. I think there was a couple of other people, Roger, whatever his name was, I can't remember his name. He was a candidate to become there. So what Nigel said on the phone to me, I always remember it, and I can say it now because it's such a. He said, "Don't tell anyone I'm calling you, but this is what you should be doing." And it was basically that. He said, "Put yourself up." Because he did respect me. I had many a pint or 7 with him over the years, and we got reasonably close in political terms and campaigning terms. But then, and then I was asked, "Would you like to?" They gave me 3 seats to choose from to stand in the general election, and one of them was against in Craig McKinley's area before he, had that terrible sepsis, which he lost his arms and his legs. Lord McKinley. I wouldn't stand against him because he was a devout Fairfield UK supporter. So I'm not going to try and fight him. And the other one, I can't even remember the other one, but they said, "Why don't you go do the front line of immigration down in Dover and Deal?" And I did do that, and that was very successful. I loved going around that place, and it was quite interesting to beat that. Mike Tapp is the guy who won, but he'd been campaigning for 2.5 years.
Right.
You drive into Dover, there was a great big across the Labour, I think, party's headquarters in Dover. There was a picture of him about 50 feet wide, 50 feet high. Had been there. I've been driving there a lot and going across on the ferry and things like that. And that had been there for as long as I can remember. So everyone knew who Mike Tapp was. Suddenly, there's a guy called Howard Cox comes along, campaigns for 3.5 weeks, but I knocked the Tories into third, and that sort of thing. I was quite proud, 23. And at 5 o'clock in the morning when it was announced, Mike Tapp came up to me and shook my hand. He said, "I thought I was going to lose that, Howard. Well done." That was nice to do that sort of thing. And and that was my first cutthroat politics in general election. That's my first, experience of that. And anyway. That all went and disappeared. Then suddenly Yusuf came on. Mohammed Yusuf came on to the party when he paid his £200,000 entrance fee, and he came on board, and everything changed. I remember going to a dinner where there was a lot of people celebrating what happened in London to some extent, in a curry house somewhere I can't remember where it is now, somewhere just not far from Soho, and there was about, I don't know, 120 of us reform people, and I gave a speech there, and he was there. It's the first time he was there, and he just looked down his nose at me. I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining things, but the man didn't give me any credence. Everything. Obviously, might have been a threat to him. I don't know what I was, and Richard was good to me that day, as was David Ball and lots of other people. But it came to the crunch. Was when, about 3 months later, I was interviewed by Dan Wootton, as I said to you. And what do I think of Tommy Robinson? And that's the rest is history. I gave him some plaudits and well done. I don't know him from Adam, but I respect what he's done. And at that point, suddenly I was a target for the leadership of Reform to say, well, if you want to go down that avenue, you're no longer part of this party. And so I said, bye-bye.
Yeah. And Rupert, what was the real spat, if you like, between Rupert and Nigel that we may not know about?
Well, my feeling is based on what I've witnessed around the edges, not actual fact. So I'm not a great fan of saying this, but I'm going to say it. Is I think Rupert is a great threat to Nigel. I think he's a much better communicator. Gets much better respect, and the way he delivers his message is much more to the point. And you can see Rupert doesn't change his mind. We've seen recently Nigel is going all over the place, flip-flopping different things, saying, I didn't do that. I said, no, 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 I never said council tax was going to go up. And, you see it non-stop. I've seen so many incredibly clever videos from people put together how he's vacillated in that point of view. And, I think, this mass deportation thing he wanted, Rupert, etc. That was very much the centre of it. And of course, Nigel believes that he needs to get as many votes as possible, so he didn't want upset perhaps the Muslim vote and all that sort of thing. And Rupert, to say that he's got dementia and that he's actually beaten up people, he's violent to Yusuf and that sort of thing in terms of some conflict. It got to the stage where unfortunately Rupert was put in a position he had no choice but to leave the party. He knows Nigel said we got rid of him. I think Rupert would have left anyway. And you've got James McMurdoch. He's had the same sort of problem. He was an MP, won under reform with he won by about 3 votes or something. He's now an independent. There's things going on, and what we're seeing with reform is it's Tory 2.0. That's what it is. You look at the people that are in there.
Yeah. And Ben's departure?
Well, Ben, he stood in 2 elections, a by-election and also the general election. And again, I think he's a threat. His brain is just way above Nigel's. His intellect he can destroy anyone in terms of actually talking facts, etc. But in such a way that you don't know you're being destroyed. And I don't think Nigel Farage can't bear more than one person running the party, one ego controlling it, and they were too much of a threat. I wasn't a threat to Nigel. I was simply, supporting someone that so much water gone under the bridge between Tommy and Nigel over the years and things, going back to all the days, UKIP days, and we can go on forever about that. But in the case of Ben, I think it's because Ben was just too much of a threat, and he came in straight away leading the party. I'm now the leader of the party. You're going, Ben, without any ceremony or any reason why. And there's certain things that Ben wanted to democratise the Reform Party. He was really trying. He's been doing that for years, or certainly a year beforehand, trying to do. And there were certain things about some of the financing of Reform that Ben was uncomfortable with, and where the money had come from, etc. So, because he challenged Nigel in this, it was bye bye Ben. And Nigel at that point was really very, very popular. He's less popular now. The people who worshipped him, I'm not joking, the Messiah has arrived, was some of the things when he became leader by so many people. A lot of these people are telling me now how wrong they were.
And it is interesting, as I say, lots of people come out of the woodwork with their own stories about Nigel and so on and so forth. Further down the road, as we get close to the election, at some stage, Rupert and Nigel and Ben, if they have got different voters between them, are going to have another conversation. Do you think those relationships can be restored?
I don't think there's been no restoration of Nigel involved. No chance. I'd still. I'm 50-50 on Ben and Rupert. That's for them to sort out. I'm not in a position to do that. I will continue to say we've got to bring the right together. Nick Tenconi, we can go on forever. There's lots of good people, who got their hearts in the right places. And as you quite rightly said, splitting the vote thing. I still believe that but the electorate are more intelligent than that if they're presented with the right policies. And our policies, I do believe Advanced UK policies will sway a lot of people over to Advanced UK.
No, but it's the point we made before, isn't it, Howard? The policies. Ben himself says it's a cigarette paper between the policies. So you're then going to look at who maybe people would say, well, who do you want as prime minister? And they'll have that discussion. If you were to pick between Ben and Rupert as prime minister, who would you pick?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for that question. It's my head says Ben, my heart says Rupert.
Well, there you go. And I think you said earlier, I'll make it easy for you. You said earlier that Rupert would be your ideal MP.
Well, he is. Well, Ben as an MP, I still think would be brilliant as well. But Rupert has got the proof in the proverbial eating. He's demonstrated in the last 18, nearly 2 years. What he's done, what he's said, etc. Under incredible pressure, political pressure from people that he worked with and trusted. he's been incredible what he's delivered. And, the child break game inquiry is a case in point. What he's delivered that. Bringing together people. Maggie Oliver and all lots and lots of people, the Pink Ladies, and we can go on forever about what Rupert has actually done. He can actually put down on paper a CV to say that he actually works, and that's what I like about it. I believe Ben Habib could have done the same, but obviously he's not an MP. So I can't say that. If you really put me on the spot, I think Rupert would be a brilliant prime minister. Okay,
So between the two, you'd pick Rupert.
just
I know you've got your loyalty and you're very good like that. And it is me putting you on the spot because, and that's my point about the electorate. Because when you say the electorate's not stupid, I always make the same point. They're not. Give them the evidence and they can make informed decisions. But when you've got two parties which are a cigarette paper between them in terms of policy, and that's Ben's own words, they're going to turn around and say, well, who would make the better prime minister? And like you, they might make that decision that it should be Rupert.
yeah. But Ben would be very much either Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, or the Chancellor. I mean,
Right.
that's
Well,
my
they have
point.
to get together then, don't they, for
Yeah,
that to
yeah,
happen?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But in terms of their status, their heavyweight status in political parlance. That's the sort of thing we're doing. And I don't know, really from a point of view of actually at this very moment who I'd vote for. But in the ideal world, in 3 years' time, I said, probably late 2028, it's going to happen. I I pray that we are going to come together in some form where we're all amicable and working for the same cause. Because that wafer, that cigarette paper width, you're absolutely right. I mean, I talk to these people around. You and I have talked to them when we go to court. Lots of them are there, and we talk to them, and they're very kind to me. They all respect what I've done in terms of public affairs campaigning for the motorist. Uh, Rupert loves me for that, and all those sorts of things. I could bring a lot of influence, from people, because of what I've done, and it'd be wrong for these two parties, Advance and Restore, must get the motorists on their side. So maybe I can help bring them together.
Well, I think you can be the Kofi Annan, if you like, of the Ben.
God, that's going back.
It does go back, but wouldn't that be great? I mean, I think that's what people want. And this is the thing. In politics, you're going to have strong characters. And this is what's going to happen. Sometimes strong characters clash. Well, sometimes, very often, they clash. And it's the ego has landed. Everybody's got an ego somewhere. Who's got the biggest ego, do you think?
That's a leading question. That's a horrible thing to give me. They're very strong characters. I said they're both great minds, great brains. I've got huge respect for both of them. But I do believe the Advanced UK is much more of a democratic setup than Restore Britain, and that's the reason why I'm with Ben.
Okay. We will continue to have that discussion. Finally, Howard, before I let you rush off to the Spectator to spill a condensed version of the Andrew Eborn show, tell,
Yes.
looking back, I mean, you pointed out that you're in your 70s, you've been doing this for a very long time, you've become a seasoned politician and a wonderful manipulator in government terms. Looking back, when your grandchildren say to you, look, Grandad, why did you do this? And what's going to be your legacy? What would you say to them?
It's a very difficult one. I think it's because I care passionately about UK PLC and UK community. I'm so proud of being British, and you notice I say don't say English, I say British. I'm proud of the union. I'm proud of that, and my wife is one of the most incredible influences on me. I always joke about she's right of Attila the Hun. Um, we always joke about it, bless her, but she's not that. I hate the far right Labour, like you said earlier. But she has been. I've always stated, "Do you think I should do this?" And she said, "You should do, Howard. You will not rest until you've got done something about it." My legacy, of course, is that 15 years of keeping some motoring costs down. I think, I don't know how. I mean, I was interviewed by Peter Walker, the political editor of The Guardian, last week in Portcullis House, the offices of the MPs. And we sat for 15 minutes. And the first question he said, Howard, you must be proud of what you've done. And that's coming from a left wing paper who's very pro net zero. And they don't hate the motorists, but they certainly, want the motorists controlled. And he said to me, it's incredible. And he said quite categorically, he said it about in 2023 that I'm probably the most successful public affairs campaigner in the history of lobbying. He said, no one has ever achieved that and kept so much money away from the Treasury. He said it in that way just to get that bit in. In other words, I've stopped, and more spending because of my campaigning. But that is to me is a compliment from my basically my enemy. So so and I've got loads of people, I've close friends I've become with various people, particularly the Taxpayers Alliance. They regularly contact me. We had a gentleman's agreement. They kept away from fuel duty. They've recently got involved with it. I don't mind that. It doesn't bother me. I'm very close to a guy called Douglas McWilliams, who's was the founder of the CEBR. And yeah, I was at a Growth Commission conference this week in the University of Buckingham, the day after I think it was the Thatcherite meeting, etc. And and Liz Truss was there, and she walked over and said, "Hello, Howard, how are you?" To be recognised like that sort of thing by an ex-prime minister, whether you like her or not, is irrelevant. It's a bit like Tommy Robinson. But I've got a lot of respect for Liz Truss, I really have, and so my legacy, I think I can actually go. When they put that nail in my coffin, I can rest saying I've done my bit.
You certainly have, Howard, and it's a delight as always to catch up. The invitation to lunch is always there. We seem to have a good lunch every time we go down to the court together. We'll do that. But for now, Howard Cox, thank you very much for joining me.
Cheers. It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you, Andrew.